Adam Beasley is on the Toyota of Hollywood hotline. He's the senior NFL reporter for Pro Football Network. You can read his work at profootballnetwork.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam H. Beasley. And Crowder, you can follow him on Blue Sky at A.H. Beasley.
What is that?
Blue Sky.
As an app?
It is the new social media platform that is attracting dozens upon dozens of eyeballs.
25 million users, actually. 25 million users over the. I can't get any engagement. I'm having a tough time. I've got like 40,000 followers on Twitter. I'm trying to get to 300 on Blue Sky, but I'm in it for the long haul. I'm in it for anyway. Gonna get sidetracked here. Mike McDaniel say anything revelatory today at his Monday press conference? Anything that would what's he gonna say? Right? I mean, it's the same old mumble jumble.
I was talking to Solana off air. I mean, the questions we want to answer can't be answered for 3 weeks, right? I mean, he's not going to say what we need to know now because he still has to coach for the next 3 weeks. And there are players in the locker room that he has to have their confidence. And there are colleagues of his that won't be working here in 3 weeks that he can't say that about now. So really it was just about the product on the field. Acknowledged, spoiler alert, they have to block better to run better. So that was a big revelation. They are going to probably get back Jalen Waddle at some point. It doesn't sound like a major knee injury, so that was good news. And still TBD about Bradley Chubb, although as I wrote on PFN today, if it was my decision, I would actually not bring him back. He has a $10 million injury guarantee in his contract in 2025, which, knowing their luck, with injuries, could be met. And so I would just sit him down all year, have him ready for the start of the 2025 season if he's in their plans. If not, move on because they can with relatively little cap pain. So that was the Mike McDaniel update from Adam Beasley.
And Bees, what are you talking about? Some of McDaniel's colleagues might not be here. I'm a personal friend with Chris Grier. He came to Gainesville in 2005. I did the little smart people test with him. Like he was a regional scout at that point. He's been with the team for 20 plus years. His dad's known in the league. Is he good at his job? Because you can go through all the draft picks and say, oh, this guy hit. He did Jalen Waddle and Jaden Phillips draft. I think that was successful. He brought in Tua. Like you can go positive, negative. Is Chris Grier a good GM? Because this damn roster is so top heavy. I think the biggest knock against him is keeping Skylar Thompson around for 3 years. Is Chris Grier a good NFL GM?
A good one, no. I mean, I would say he's probably about average, and that's what his record suggests. He's been the GM since 2016, I think, but really he was Mike Tannenbaum's right-hand man then. Since he's had the full control of the roster in 2019, Channing, here are the stats. They're 50-47, average. Point differential minus 87, a little bit below average. 0-2 in the playoffs, not nearly good enough. And some of the big decisions he's made in the last 12 months, none of them look great yesterday. He decided to make Tua Tagovailoa the fifth highest paid quarterback in NFL history. Tua had arguably his worst game as a pro, one of his worst games in a big moment as a pro. He not only gave up 5 draft picks, including a first rounder for Tyreek Hill. He's paid him once, if not once, but twice since that trade. Tyreek Hill has been invisible in many large moments, and he was again on Sunday. And I think the one that, like, you all wish you had one back, and I think the one he wishes he had back was the ribbing he gave us, not just this year, but last year as well, about our concerns about the offensive line, joking about how we're more concerned about it than he is. And guys, you look at the offensive line yesterday, there was one legitimate NFL starter on that line, and that was Aaron Brewer. Beyond that, there were a bunch of backups out there. And some guys that might not even be rostered if they weren't on the Miami Dolphins starting for this team. So, yeah, that to me is pretty damning. I just don't know how. I think if you look at it from 30,000 feet, I don't know how he's going to be able to explain to Stephen Ross. Ross gave him everything he wanted beginning in 2019, and this is the product 6 years in. 0 playoff wins, 2 playoff appearances. Look, guys, this division this year is terrible, and the AFC is not particularly good aside from 3 or 4 or 5 maybe teams. they can't make noise with this schedule. With the Texans are not a very good team. They're going to make the playoffs because they're in a bad division, and they were largely non-competitive on offense. And you have the offensive coach that you hired, the quarterback you paid, the offensive line you picked, the wide receivers that you acquired and paid multiple times for, and all of it was for 12 points. To me, I think the body of work for Chris Grier is what's going to get him. It's not just one thing. It's the fact that here we are in 2024, and what progress can we say this team has made in the last 6 years? They are on that same 8-9, 9-8, 10-7 treadmill that they've been for a very long time. And I don't know how he's going to be able to explain that away.
So if you were Stephen Ross, because you wrote at Pro Football Network, like Chris Grier's got to go. If you're Stephen Ross, is that the first change you make? Is that the only change you make?
No, it's not. Well, I think there needs to be changes. If Mike McDaniel comes back, there needs to be changes to his coaching staff. Danny Crossman's got to go. Right? I mean, he's had so many chances and they got out-coached. In addition to being outplayed, they got out-coached yesterday. That fake punt might have been the difference between them making the playoffs and not making the playoffs, right? And these special teams have been bad for a long time. Sure, Jason Sanders is great from 50+, but a guy can't make an extra point when it matters. That's not great. Fumble punt cost them in Green Bay. We know the laundry list of concerns that they've had on special teams. And I don't know why Crossman was back this year. He's got to be gone this coming year. So if you bring McDaniel back, you have to have some demands. The staff has to be shaken up. I think you have to look at the offense in general too. Like, why can't this offense go on the road and win? Why can't this offense go against good teams and win? Why does this offense completely disappear in the cold, right? When Mike McDaniel faces his friends, and I wrote this story last week and it came to fruition, his friends know how to beat this offense, right? I mean, DeMeco Ryans knows Mike McDaniel as well as anybody in the league. They've been together off and on since 2006. He knew the game plan to beat this offense and ran it to perfection. Changes need to happen there. They need to get better in a lot of different ways. These pre-snap motions that are just too much when you're on the road and there's all this noise and it's 10 seconds left in the play clock and they're just breaking the huddle time and time again. We've seen these pre-snap penalties, all these things that have just been the same. Like, we've talked about this with you. I've talked about it with you guys. I've talked about it with Solana. We've talked about this for 3 years now. And literally every concern we've had about this team was magnified in the most important moment of the season yesterday. Steve Ross is a patient man, but he's not Job, right? I mean, at some point he's going to snap and he's going to have enough. And the question is how bad the fallout is when that happens.
And Bees, we talk about Tua. The numbers are there since he came back from injury. The completion percentage, the yards per game, the lowering turnovers, all the stuff. Tua's a good quarterback. We talked about earlier today. You put Tua in Cincinnati. Does he have the same numbers Burrow has? You put Tua in Kansas City in that Andy Reid offense. Is he going to ball like? I don't want to say hold him back, but is Tua an elite quarterback that's kind of in a situation that's not extremely advantageous for him, or is he a product of the system?
Well, I would say this. You put him in a cold environment, he will not play as well as he has. Like, if you put him in Cincinnati, you put him in Kansas City, you're going to see a lot of what you saw in Green Bay, what you saw in KC last year. That's what you're going to see. I think Tua's got to have a very specific city with a very specific coach with very specific personnel around him. Does that mean he needs to be carried by the fastest group of wide receivers ever to step foot in the National Football League? No, he doesn't need that. In fact, I think maybe some of that has held him back. I think you see what he's able to do with a big target with Jonnu Smith. This idea that he has to have these little guys that are in and out of their breaks, running free to make it happen. No, Jonnu Smith's been their best receiver this year. I don't think it's been close. So, there are other schemes that he can do well in. Guys, we have never seen him be able to sit back there and survey the coverage for 3-4 seconds like every other NFL quarterback that's good is able to do. Like, we've never seen that. We've never seen him have pass protection that good. We've never seen him consistently have a dominant running game that other quarterbacks have. Look, I mean, Pacheco's not, Gale Sayers, but he's a really good running back, right?
No.
They've had that in Kansas City. They've had that. Look at Jared Goff. You put Tua on the Detroit Lions, he is Jared Goff. he might be better than Jared Goff. So I think that in a lot of ways, I think Tua is papering over some huge flaws on this roster, among the scheme, coaching decisions. But yes, I do think he has limitations. I do think that he and cold weather aren't a great mix. But you can coach around that if you give him all these other things these top quarterbacks have.
So is this build salvageable if Chris Grier does end up losing his job at the end of the season? And let's just say, hypothetically, McDaniel stays, Tua obviously is going to stay. Is this build salvageable, Bees? Does a general manager come in, and would he be able to either through the draft, this upcoming draft, and through the offseason, make this roster, put it where it needs to be? Or do you anticipate, a new GM comes in and it's kind of a full rebuild in terms of how the roster has been constructed?
I do think full rebuilds are a little overblown because every year there is significant turnover, right? And they're going to be, I think, one of the 7 or 8 most cap-strapped teams in the National Football League next year. They're not going to be a real rich team where they can go out and solve all their problems. I would start with trading Tyreek Hill. I think that is where you begin this process because we have now basically 50 games of data that tells us that Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jalen Waddle combined have a very hard ceiling, right? And of those 3, there's really only one you can trade. Can't trade Tua. Waddle just got his contract. He's the younger of them. And I know he hasn't had a great season. Injuries were tough for him this year. I still think he has a ton of upside. We may have seen the best of Tyreek Hill, right? And so I think of those 3, what are you going to be okay not building around? Tyreek's one of them. You take some of that money off your cap. You're able to do some things, maybe get an asset. They're not like I wrote it back in October. They screwed up. They believed they got high on their own supply, so to speak. They believed that they had enough to make a run, even though they were 2-6, which was crazy for them not to, pull the plug right then and go on and trade a bunch of these assets away. And so they're not going to get the most return they could have gotten Tyreek, 2 months ago or whatever it was, but they can still get something for Tyreek. I would do that. I would significantly.
You think, by the way, his lack of production has a lot to do with himself, right? That's what I got from reading what you wrote today about Tyreek. Well, it's not just a quarterback unable to get him the ball. Like you were critical of him.
Yeah, I mean, look what Derek Stingley did to him yesterday. I mean, like I know McDaniel postgame kind of brushed it aside, but like the next gen stats are real. He couldn't get open yesterday, and that to me is stunning. Like if Stingley locked him down, okay, what's the point then, right? What is the point of having a $30 million receiver who can't even get you a jump ball, right? I know he's done lots of things really well. The best of Tyreek Hill is incredible. 1,700 yards in back-to-back seasons. You cannot say anything about that. But I will say this. How many of those yards and touchdowns were impactful? How many of them won them games against very good teams? Is that a $30 million investment you have there? Are you going to continue to go down that road when you've seen you need to diversify your offense? Like, I would much rather take Tyreek's money and get 3 starting offensive linemen. I think if you're asking me what will have a bigger impact on the production of this team, picking up 3rd and 1's a lot more important to me than the occasional go route, right? Like they can't pick up a 3rd and 1. I think it's largely because of the construction of their roster. So, yeah, no, I it's, I don't want to be too harsh, but I do think the best days of Tyreek Hill are behind him. I think that we have seen, and again, the peak is incredibly high. He's a Hall of Fame player. Like he at his very best, he was as good as we've seen in the National Football League. Very, very good player. I just think that what we saw this year, what we saw, in key moments the last 3 years, they can do better with their roster than having all that money tied up in one player.
And Beats, it's funny you talk about that because that track meet mentality of everybody said that, the Dolphins are a track meet. Achan's 4-3, Waddle's 4-3, Tyreek's 4-2. I look around the league now and see the teams that are dominant, speaking of Philly, speaking of Detroit, even Buffalo. It seems like it's going back to when I played, that if you can kick somebody's butt in the trenches, that's the dominant teams. This track meet crap is cool, and I know Hawk loves 45-point games, but is the league kind of steering back towards that old school mentality of run the ball and get in the fourth quarter and whoop somebody's tail physically?
Well, Crowder, you can do both. I mean, look at the Lions. Do you think they're like? I mean, they have very good players on offense for sure. They're built to bully you. They are absolutely built to bully you, and they're able to score 50 a game, right? I mean, you it's not just one or the other. I think it's philosophy, and the philosophy is if teams know that if the Miami Dolphins have to nickel and dime you on the road against good teams to win, it's not going to work for them. They know that if they can go, cover two deep, whatever you want to call it, put a tarp over the back of the defense and saying, okay, good luck. And then your offensive line can't win those light boxes. Game over, right? It's game over. So I think you can do both. I don't think that the idea of like scoring a ton of points should be ruled out by any stretch of the imagination, but they're going about it in a way that's beatable, especially if they're not getting the production from the line they need. So all these things are going to have to be considered by Mike McDaniel, right? He is going to have, assuming he's the coach in 2025, he's going to have to go through this. It's like, why is there a hard ceiling to what I'm doing, right? Because if you were building the vision of a Mike McDaniel offense, you would start with a quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa. You would start with receivers like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. You would have running backs like Devon Achane and Jalen Wright and Raheem Mostert and all these guys. These are the things you would do, and it's not working. And he has to come to the realization and adapt. And I think these are one of the conversations Steve Ross is going to have with him, assuming Ross wants to keep him, is like, look, you've got to make this change. You absolutely have to. We'll see if McDaniel's willing to do it.
Adam Beasley, Pro Football Network. Follow him on Blue Sky, A.H. Beasley. See you, Bees. We appreciate your time, man.
All right,